Check, check. Hey, good morning, everybody. I can't. Good morning, everybody. Can I get your attention, please? First of all, I apologize for being late. Sometimes that's the tragedy of being a citizen legislator. That stated, I know there's a lot of people who want to speak. We want to be respectful about that, but we'd like to get this through as quickly as possible. So we're going to go ahead and stand at ease for 5 minutes while we get that sign-up sheet done. And then we're going to close the sign-up sheet in 5 minutes, and then we're going to proceed. So let's just go ahead and do that, and we'll come back to you in 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Good morning again, everybody. We're going to get going here. If you have an interest in speaking, please make sure you're on that sign-up sheet. Here's going to be the agenda of the day, and we haven't called the meeting to order, but just for an FYI purposes, we understand that there's a lot of folks who want to speak. I'm going to give the floor to the bill sponsor, Representative Wade. He'll go through and present the bill. I will give the committee time to ask questions of the bill sponsor. And so the bill sponsor will still remain in the hot seat at that time. After that, we'll go ahead and we'll take public comment. Right now, my goal is to be able to adjourn by 1:15 because we need to be able to move on for full committee. So just hypothetically, that's 60 minutes. If there's 30 speakers, I'm going to go 2 minutes apiece. We do have 2 people online who want to testify, so I'm going to go ahead and add them in also. I'll go ahead and tell you if you're on deck. Since we won the World Series, I'll go ahead and use baseball metaphors as much as I can. So if I say that you're on deck, if you could do me a small favor, stand by that second pillar. So when it's ready to go, we can keep this thing moving very efficiently. If I put up my right arm, that means that you're about 10 seconds away from whatever time limit I've given you. I'm not trying to be rude. I promise you what we're trying to do is give everybody an opportunity to be heard. And I think that's what's fair. The last thing I would ask you is, please, if you are going to say nearly the exact same thing that someone before you said, please feel to say, I'd like to repeat the comments of Mr. Fernandez or Mrs. Smith, but also add this color. At least we understand, in a sense, where you're coming from. Add a little bit of color, and then we can get done. I'm not suggesting what you're going to say is not important, but if we've already heard it once or twice, I think going ahead and saying, I'd like to emphasize that and then move to your next point is probably the most efficient way for you to use your time. So hopefully that helps everybody. What I'd like to do is now call the meeting to order. I'm going to recognize Representative Irwin to open us up in prayer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to pray to you, Lord, and be with you. Lord, please continue to provide us the wisdom that we need to do all of our jobs. And Lord, help us to get together and hook some arms and be a group that works for the betterment of the state and for this country. Lord, watch over us, keep us healthy and safe. And Lord, we ask you all this as we continue to strive to show that we love you and we honor you, Lord. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Irwin. The next thing I want to do for those of you who were with us last week, we had a challenge with Zoom. I want to go ahead and test it now, if that's okay, because if we do have an issue with Zoom, I'd like to take the time when we're doing in-person testimony to fix it so the people online aren't disenfranchised. So I'm going to recognize Representative Cantrell. Representative Cantrell, can you please give us a test?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Do you want me to test the video as well?
I think that would be great if you could do that, please.
Okay.
All right, great. We sure do appreciate that, Representative Cantrell. For those of you on Zoom, we're going to keep you on mute. If you need to raise your hand, please do so. And we'll make sure if you've signed up for public testimony, you will be recognized. I want to go ahead right now and give the floor to Representative Wade. Mr. Wade, if you could please present your bill. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, committee members, colleagues, and the folks that are here today to either support or to not support this bill. I appreciate your presence. I want to start out by acknowledging a couple of things. We're here to have a conversation today about something that's extremely important. And I want you to understand a little bit about who I am and why I'm here today and why I've worked on this bill and want to continue to work on this issue. And that is, we are the human race. And there are people that are not in this room right now that are in classrooms in our state. They're children. And this is about making sure that we approach this issue with them at the center. Not adults, not partisanship, not our wishes, our fears, but our goal to make sure that we provide the best possible education for every child in this state of all races. I'm a son of 2 educators. My wife is a lifelong career educator of over 20 years. She's now a local administrator at a middle school. I have 2 children, a 2nd grader and a kindergartner. My daughter's class, the class that was first impacted by COVID, they're now in 2nd grade. They have experienced school the way they had hoped for, and then the world changed on them. And it changed for every teacher, every administrator, every superintendent, and every family in this state, in this nation, and in this world. I say all that to say that we have gone through a period of time in history that is unprecedented. And fear sometimes creeps in and it causes us to overreact. So I have tried to take the approach that my father, my pastor, and some folks that I care about deeply to address this issue, to listen to folks that have concerns that are sincere, and also folks that think that this legislation may not go far enough for their aim and their will, or that it does too much. So as we have this conversation, my approach to things, especially legislation, is let us reason together. So colleagues, I do come before you today to present a substitute, and we're going to be working from LC 490827S. And I don't mind telling you that I believe that this legislation has gotten better through dialogue with people who don't always agree. This is edit number 14 that the committee members are seeing today. This is not something that has been rushed. And I will admit that the thinking on this issue, I believe, is not over. But hopefully we're beginning to bring it to the center and look at it from the perspective and the lens of a child's eyes. Like many of you, I believe a quality education is the foundation of the future for all of our kids in our state. For millions of young Georgians, the entire trajectory of their lives is molded in the classroom or even on the ball field of the schools. It's our collective responsibility as policymakers to ensure that these students are given the tools necessary to succeed in a safe, welcoming, and informative environment. And that's why today I joined countless parents and guardians and grandparents in my district, the 9th District of Georgia, but also every corner of this state, in being deeply concerned about what we're seeing in some of the classrooms across the country. And ultimately, that is due to the fact that we have a media that has never been more polarized, and we have a political environment that has never been more polarized, at least in modern era. There are those that have partisan agendas, and they are dividing students along political lines. They are promoting them the idea that they may oppress other students based on their race or their fellow classmates for the idea of the color of their skin, and that their students' character should be judged not by their actions or their words, but merely by their race. I truly believe, and I believe every person in this room believes, that this approach is dangerous. It's simply wrong. We have seen the loudest voices of the extremes of both major parties grab and seek attention by creating more and more division in our nation and even in our state. And I will acknowledge that many of them do it for the sheer fact of raising money to continue this continuous push to divide us. Folks, our children, they're watching this. So parents have concerns, along with many Georgians. The Protect Students First Act, which is before you, will ensure that each and every student in Georgia is treated with dignity and respect, and their education is provided for them free from any divisive ideology. HB 1084 specifically protects the academic freedom and the free speech rights of our faculty and staff. It encourages training and enhances learning about different cultures and promotes mutual respect and tolerance of different viewpoints. Unlike what you may read in the media, the bill also carefully and clearly defines divisive ideologies. This legislation also recognizes that students in Georgia classrooms must be taught all our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it also outlines that those lessons should be grounded in established fact, not subject to someone else's dangerous ideological beliefs. Our classrooms are meant to teach kids how to think and to think critically, but not what to think, especially to promote an idea that somehow that they are superior or inferior than another based on the color of their skin. I truly believe this is not a partisan issue. In fact, I believe if you will take the time to read this substitute that's presented to you, committee members, and I hope I'm a freshman, so I don't know how the process for these substitutes to be made available to the public. It is my wish as the sponsor that if that has not happened, that it happen as soon as possible, because I do want everyone to read through it, and I want you to think about it and read it and share with me any concerns. But I do believe if you understand the aim and the purpose, and you're sitting as a child and you see that as the center, that you're going to have a hard time finding something to disagree with the intent of this legislation. We can argue about some of the process things. We can discuss numbers of days to allow communities to hopefully resolve these issues at home. But ultimately, I think you'll find that this is trying to address something that needs to be addressed, no matter if you're an independent, a Democrat, or a Republican. This puts our kids first and their futures first. I'm a son of two teachers, and my dad was a mathematician, and my mother was very, very good at English and history. And so I was always fighting between their aims to make me the best historian or the best mathematician. And ultimately, I probably failed at both. But I'm now reminded the complexities of life and legislation. Seldom is any argument right 100% of the time or wrong 100% of the time. Thomas Sowell said that, and I find it very important for us to think about that today. I'm going to give you a couple more points, and then I'll begin the process to yield for questions. But I want you to think about this, okay? Martin Luther King, who I was raised by my parents to understand what his life was about and what he went through for the purpose of his fellow man and women and children. And one of my favorite quotes that my dad and mom shared with me as a young man is this one. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. My heart is in this bill. And I want you to know that we must seek out the opportunity to reach unity in our diversity. And like Mahatma Gandhi said, it will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. This is a test that I intend to try to pass, and I hope you'll join me. Now, a couple of points within the bill. This is going to lay out exactly what divisive concepts are, and that educator trainings will not promote divisive concepts. But I also want to remind you that, yes, there are high school classes where people will talk about current events. Teachers are not the target. Administrators are not the target. The process that this bill lays out will allow for an individual parent that has a concern to provide evidence of that concern, whether it's student-to-student issue, whether it is a teacher who possibly inadvertently says something that would be considered a divisive concept under this law, or there's a curriculum or a program that would fall into this piece of legislation. I do believe in the vast majority of places in this state that local school administrators and teachers and parents can come together through a process to resolve these kind of conflicts. They do it in many, many other areas. But there is concern that there's not enough done and that there's not an expectation that every corner of the state that a process is made available and known to every parent. This will ensure that parents know their opportunity to communicate with their local school and to be heard, but also for teachers and administrators to investigate fairly and consistently without putting children in the crosshairs between each other in the classroom. I also want to require and point this out. There's part of the legislation that discusses what the PSC's role in this is. We're not changing anything as it relates to their process. And I want to point this out. There are 150,000 roughly teachers and educators in this state. But for the committee members in the community here, you may not know this, but there are occasionally folks that step outside of their current role and what they're supposed to do. And they're referred to the PSC by their administrators. There are 71 cases per month, and there are an average of 39 sanctions per month. And if you look at the period from December of 2020 to the period of December of 2021, 96 educators received 1-year suspension, and that's out of 150,000. So I would say over 99% of the teachers get it right every single day. I know what it's like for their life. I grew up with it. My wife is an educator. There are days that she doesn't get to go to the restroom. There are days that she's mama, she's grandmama, she's sister, she's counselor, she's remediator, and sometimes she's also the only person in the room that has told them that that child has an opportunity to do whatever they want to do. They're the encouragers of so many of our children. But every once in a while, there are teachers and educators that make mistakes. And during that same period of time, 83 of those lost their teacher certificates. And I say that to put this in perspective. Every once in a while, there's a student in that classroom, and it might be your child. And there are sometimes situations that occur that are just completely unacceptable. And we have a process to deal with it. This is not going to open up parents to question that process. They will get an opportunity to be heard. And if those concerns are ignored, there's a process to ratchet it up to the local school board. And I believe in very rare, but potentially cases might have to make their way to our State Board of Education to come in and do a review to ensure that the parent and the child is protected. I also want to note that we're not changing any of the Georgia standards. I have them here, and I'm sure that all the committee members, the Department of Education, Richard Woods, the governor's office, folks with GAE, folks with Gale, GSBA. I've spoken with several superintendents and teachers. I've tried to bring in as much input as possible to make this a better bill. We're not changing the standards in Georgia. I'm not going to read this exhaustive list, but I want to let you know in K-5 in Georgia, we explain America's involvement in World War II. We talk about Pearl Harbor. We talk about D-Day. We talk about the Holocaust. We talk about leaders such as Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill, Truman, Mussolini, Hitler. We're not changing the standard. In 6th through 8th grade, we're going to explain conflict and change in Europe, the aftermath after World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, Nazism, the worldwide depression, all of those things are extremely important. We're not changing any standards with this legislation. We also, in 9th through 12th, we demonstrate an understanding of the global political, economic, and social impact of World War II. We're going to talk about the major conflicts of outcomes, including North Africa, the Pacific, European theaters, and the continuation of what happened to the millions of people who were killed in the Holocaust. And I say all that to say this. There's another point. Do the committee members and do the folks in the public know that in this world, there's an estimated total enslaved population of 40,300,000 human beings. today. This is a human race issue. And I'm going to tell you what modern day slavery is defined. This is through think tanks. Worldpopulationreview.com is the source. I've got some young college students that I've helped sponsor that are interns, and they're concerned about this issue as young people. And so they wanted to share with me their thoughts about modern day slavery. So I want to share that with you. There are 8 million people living in slavery in India, 3.8 million in China, 3.1 million in Pakistan, 2.6 in North Korea, 1.3 million in Nigeria, and 750,000 in Afghanistan. And of course, these are estimates. But modern day slavery is slavery by ownership, government conscription, forced labor, as an example, forced prison labor, migrant labor, debt bondage, sex slavery, forced marriage, child labor, and forced begging. Folks, we want to do better. And the place to cure the racial issues, I believe, is in the classroom, to ensure that every single child is not mistreated by saying that they are somehow better than or worse than another child in their class. You know, I admire Johnny Isaacson. And I want you to think about this. When my kids got to go back to school, they had one opinion. I can't wait to see my friends. And I taught them that there's going to be an opportunity for them to also have future friends because of people like Johnny Isaacson. This issue, folks, is not about putting children in a position to become adults any sooner than this world is pushing. I want us to protect students. I'm only going to read to you guys lines 27 through 42, and then I will open up for questions. This code section is defining divisive concepts. Lines 26, as used in this code section, the term 1, divisive concepts, means any of the following concepts, including views espousing such concepts. One race is inherently superior to another race. The United States of America is fundamentally racist. An individual, by virtue of his or her race, is inherently racist or oppressive toward individuals of other races, whether consciously or subconsciously. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race. An individual's moral character is inherently determined by his or her race. An individual, by virtue of his or her race, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other individuals of the same race. An individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of physical, psychological distress because of his or her race. That meritocracies are racist or were created by individuals of a particular race to oppress individuals of another race, or any other form of race scapegoating or race stereotyping. I sort of lied to you inadvertently. I want to read one other piece that I think is extremely important to ensure that teachers are also protected. This is not going to prevent First Amendment rights. It's not going to prevent a teacher from talking about the fact that critical race theory is in the news, or that what happens when we start talking about what happened during the Holocaust, or if we start discussing what's happening in China today with a Uyghur population that is being harmed and enslaved. There is nothing in this that is going to put them at risk because they are discussing when it is academically appropriate. So please know that that is in this bill as well. And if you would look at page, I want to make sure I get the right page. So it's starting in lines 77 through 96. I'll just read it once, but this will not prohibit. So this section is what this bill will not do. It will not prohibit the discussion of divisive concepts as a part of a larger course of instruction in a professionally and academically appropriate manner and without espousing personal political beliefs. Some of my best teachers, I couldn't tell you if they were independent, Democrat, or Republican. Those kids are kids. They should not be political pawns for anybody, especially because of their race. So as you can see, a lot of folks have weighed in on this. I believe this is a good bill. I'm not going to say it's a perfect bill because people aren't perfect. But I hope that you will thoughtfully consider favorable consideration of this bill because of what this is going to do to ensure that our children are at the center of the purpose of education in this state. We've heard it said, and I grew up listening to my parents tell me about the situations in Atlanta. My parents lived in Decatur when they were first married. And the idea that Atlanta was too busy to hate. And last session, we passed hate crimes legislation because this state is too great a state to hate. Folks, let's make a good choice for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wade. We sure do appreciate that overview. At this time, the chair will entertain questions from the committee. Are there any questions? All right, not seeing any. Oh, excuse me, Representative Carter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess no one else had any questions. I have quite a few.
Okay.
So, thank you, my new friend. Not for bringing this bill. I can't thank you for that, but thank you, my new friend. So I've read this bill. I'm really trying to understand. First, we had HB 888, had everybody in an uproar. Then I guess y'all tried to do a scaled down version with HB 1084. But I'm really, even after listening to you, I really still do not understand what brought us here.
Okay. There are parents. Is that the question? Just want to make sure to my friends.
Well,
What brought
normally
us here?
when there's a bill, we're either trying to solve or fix something.
Right.
So yeah, help me understand. 'cause
Sure. I believe each of the committee members received a sheet that was provided that gives you each examples of what I believe and what this bill would lay out are divisive concepts for local communities to try to address. This is a proactive piece of legislation.
Oh,
How many folks in the room have watched any news in the last 12 months? Would you agree that there are media outlets that push the division of people based on the color of their skin or the political party that they subscribe to? I would think that is a yes. Okay. Parents are concerned that children are going to be exposed to thinking that may be more appropriate for a college law class or the greater discussion as adults, but not to put children in a position to where they are somehow pitted against each other based on their race. It's very focused and targeted to specific things that it will prevent from happening in the classroom. And if a parent believes that their child, no matter their race, is in a position where they are told that they are somehow superior or inferior based on their color of their skin, or there's a program or a guest speaker or someone comes into the school and their child comes home and they say that, hey, mom, this is what happens. This is what happened today. That parent has an opportunity, and this legislation lays out a process that most schools have something similar. But I think codifying it so that parents know, I first can go to the principal, and the principal can decide, are we going to do this with my cabinet or my leadership team or a content expert if it happens to be a piece of curriculum? And let's review the parent's concern. Did this happen? If it did, there needs to be an opportunity for a cooling down process. There's a gentleman that I believe may speak today. I don't know for sure, but he shared with me that he's very supportive of this legislation because we're in a period of time where anxiety is high. Mental health issues are running rampant. the negative impact of COVID, I think, will far exceed our current understanding because of what's happened, especially to children. We don't need to continue to have a divide. We need to put in place ways that kids can continue to look at each other as just kids, as human beings, and not get into this battle based on the color of their skin. Every single child has an incalculable value that should never be stamped down by an adult on purpose, especially. And when it happens by accident, I think there's a process where parents need to make sure that those teachers, if that happens, it's addressed quickly. If it's ignored, then the parents have an opportunity to raise the level of concern, to have those issues reviewed in a reasonable and appropriate manner with thought and consideration. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to be clear that you answered my question. And if I heard you, it sounded like you said you were trying to get in front of a problem, and then you made reference to the news media.
Well, if you'll look at the examples that I provided to you as a committee member, there are examples of where issues that are of divisive concepts that have occurred in this state. There are news reporters in the room, I believe. The AJC has shared these type of incidents. And I don't mind telling you that there are incidents that I saw last night. You know, people were sharing with me. I haven't validated it, so I want to be very careful. But they espoused that it was in a Georgia school, that teachers were trying to put children in a position to mimic that of what Hitler did, and kids were uncomfortable with that. They were high school students. This puts in a position to make sure that when this happens, there's a process for parents, teachers, and administrators to hopefully resolve it locally. But if parents are ignored, any parent of children of any race, they will have an avenue to be heard and to make sure that that incident is reviewed by somebody that will look at it from both sides.
Okay, so I think I heard my answer. You're saying a lot, but if I understand that there are already processes within our school system that parents can make complaints that can be addressed. But I really was trying to understand what initiated this bill, and I'm listening very intently to you. I've tried to read through this bill a few times. I'm looking at some of the verbiage, and it is concerning as a parent. But I want to go back to when you were discussing various topics of history that are taught, and I was listening very intently. So at what grade level is slavery discussed in our history? Because you talked about the Holocaust, you talked about various wars, but I didn't hear you. I heard you talk about modern day history. If we're going to talk about U.S. history, I want to know, where is that taught? Because one of my biggest concerns is we continue in the U.S. to try to attempt to erase history, and it in fact happens. So help me if you can with that.
I certainly can. So in Georgia standards right now, and what I will do, Chairman, I will get, I've worked with Richard Woods and the Superintendent, Department of Education, and some of their staff to provide me a list of the standards. So I will have that request and make sure that they email those to each member.
Thank you.
The history of slavery is covered in these ways. In kindergarten, students are asked to identify the national holidays and describe the people and or events celebrated. They also focus on Juneteenth, National Independence Day. They have to discuss that under the terms of slavery. In fourth grade, students are asked to describe specialization as it relates to difference in economics of the North and South. Economic discussions of the South would include slavery or the conditions that led to slavery, or how slavery helped make the products of the South profitable. Understanding the dynamics as to why people in that day made those choices. Today, we understand that that was completely abhorrent, right? That's a part of the learning process in the fourth grade. Eighth grade, students explain the importance of the Georgia Charter of 1732, including the initial reasons for settlement. Slavery was forbidden in the charter because it was inconsistent with the trustees' reason for settlement. That's a part of the eighth grade curriculum in Georgia through the Georgia standards. In high school United States history, students are asked to explain economic development of the Southern colonies, which also includes the concepts of enslavement, what caused it, who was a part of it, etc. I can continue. There's also discussions about Jim Crow laws and relating to the people and events like the civil rights movement. First grade, students are expected to read and describe the life of historical figures in American history. One of those is Ruby Bridges. Students cannot describe the life of Ruby without an understanding of the racial segregation of the schools. My daughter was a first grader last year. We actually did this as a family. In fifth grade, students are asked to describe the changing roles of African Americans and Blacks, including the Tuskegee Airmen. That would obviously include discussions of slavery, as well as other issues related to Jim Crow laws. In fifth grade, high school United States history, and students are asked to explain how voting rights are protected by the 15th, 19th, 23rd, 24th, and 26th Amendments. And explaining the 15th Amendment requires students to understand that it prevents laws that discriminate based on race. And then in eighth grade, students explain how the development of Atlanta under mayors William B. Hartsfield and Ivan Allen Jr. impacted Atlanta. During Hartsfield's administration, Atlanta was called the city too busy to hate. That's actually a part of the Georgia Standard. And Atlanta's when and how Atlanta's public schools were integrated. I'm proud to tell you that my parents were both living in Decatur and educators at the time. And in some cases, they were the only white educators in majority African-American schools.
Okay.
So those are a start. There's also Georgia Standards of Excellence of Social Studies, K through 12. In sixth and seventh grade, their modern world studies, they discuss about world history and those things like that happened related to the Holocaust. I can continue to provide that.
I mean, that's on you. I just wanted to, you named a few errors.
Yes.
You did name steps. I wanted to put that in there.
Yes.
And you mentioned a couple times about Atlanta being too busy to
Too
hate.
busy to hate.
Yeah, as a native Atlantan, I tell you, one of the things that I was never taught, and I don't know if it's in the schools districts, and I think we should add it back. But are you aware of the Atlanta race riot of 1906?
I am.
Is that currently taught in our standards?
In all honesty, I would have to find out if it is specifically. This is a summary.
Okay.
So I think that's a question that I'm
'Cause I
happy to
think,
ask.
You know, going back, not
department.
to cut you out, but going back to my major concern with this bill is eliminating the history and the truth. We talk about, you talked about a couple things, but talking about the Atlanta race riots of 1906 and really was political, right? But if a teacher taught that based on this piece of legislation, they could potentially have some type of violation.
I understand the concern, but I can assure you that this legislation actually prevents that from happening. As I outlined a few moments before at the end of, I know was a long conversation for my presentation, but I believe the issue is so divisive that I want to make sure that we talk about it and have a conversation. And that is in the areas of lines 77 through 96. I'm going to look at lines 80 through 84. First, prohibit the full and rigorous implementation of curricula or elements of curriculum that are required as a part of advanced placement, international baccalaureate, or dual enrollment coursework, provided, however, that such implementation is done in a professional and academically appropriate manner without espousing personal political beliefs. So we're not going to prohibit an AP class from having a conversation about the 1906 riots and discuss that it had political undertones, right? I think there's lots of our history. And I want to share this experience that opened my eyes to this even more. And it's thanks to my wife. She was getting her master's degree in 2004, June, actually. We had the opportunity for her to do a study abroad where she was teaching English to Polish students. So we went to Poland for 3 weeks. We were there when President Reagan passed away. I tell you this because I had an opportunity to go to Auschwitz and Birkenau. It shook my core to know that there were people that were treated in that manner. I had studied about the Holocaust. I think we need to make sure that we allow students to understand the pain and suffering that humans have done to each other throughout history. But there was one takeaway that the gentleman who was a math teacher, Poland, who actually survived the Holocaust, immigrated to America. Took him 12 years to go through our immigration process back in those days. Became a professor at Kennesaw State and a great guy. And he said, I come to America and you have some good history and you have some bad history, but your history is very short. My ancestors in Poland were here for over 2,500 years, and we have so much history to cover. So how do you pick what you choose? You guys have plenty of time to cover all of your history. We have to really pick and choose. So he gave me a perspective that we probably need to consider other standards, other topics that need to be enhanced in our K-12 education. I would love to work bipartisanly to address those concerns where every single person can share specific events in history for their communities. Native American, African American, Appalachian American, if you'll have it. We all have races. Interestingly enough, there are 7 races defined by the federal government that the state has to track. It's only 7. And one of those is more than 2. So those are the specific measurements that states have to do, and those Caucasian, African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, etc. I say that to say every race needs to be discussed. We don't need to pit as one race is greater than or less than another.
Thank
Representative
you. I
Carter.
appreciate that. And I'm just gonna close with this, which I think one of the most concerning things that I have, how we do business here at the Georgia General Assembly, bringing a bill like this, it would have been great to have an opportunity for the committee, especially having those of us who were brought to the U.S. against our will, to really have a conversation about what's really happening. And so my hope is that we will not rush this, because it is rushed, because you have not had a very diverse conversation, especially with the members of the Georgia General Assembly. And I would say the Black members in particular.
Okay. Well, I'll be happy to let you know that I did reach out to your leader, the minority leader. I also spoke with Dean Smyrie about the specific issue. I welcome conversations with anybody. If you have specific ideas you want to talk about as an individual representative, or if we want to have a conversation to ensure that children are at the center of legislation in Title 20, to me, that's the important piece. Everything else is adult. So I'm happy to do
Let's
that.
absolutely have the
you.
conversation.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Recognize Chairman Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Wade, for bringing this bill. I just wanted to follow up on the question from Representative Carter. I did refer to your handout of some examples of divisive concepts. And as you know, I represent a district in Gwinnett County, and I have had constituents from my district and also people who I don't represent, but individuals who live in Gwinnett County who have reached out to me over some concerns. And there are even children who have been taken out of the Gwinnett County Public Schools based upon some hateful rhetoric coming from our chairwoman of the Board of Education. And I would like to ask you if some of this is what prompted your legislation. Dr. Therese Johnson posted that we have all white spaces, her words, not mine, where white children, quote, gleefully soak in their whitewashed history, end quote, so they can, quote, use violence against Black bodies to keep those spaces white. Another post, she questions, quote, how can white kids be doing okay when they're growing up to be police officers, district attorneys, mayors, judges, media, mothers, fathers, and presidents who take away Black life and call it justified. She goes on in other statements to say that the time has come when injustices must be reconciled and reparations made to the descendants of chattel slavery. Another comment, this is a quote, as Black bodies drop like flies around us from physical, medical, economic, and material deprivation and violence at white hands, how can we, in any of our minds or metrics, conclude that whites are all right? Did any of these statements from the chairperson of the largest school district in the state, did any of these motivate this legislation that you're bringing to us today?
So what I would say is that many parents shared some of those statements to many members of the General Assembly. And I will want to share this. Representative Brad Thomas and I started talking about this conversation because we had concerned citizens reaching out to us. We're newly elected and they want to engage in conversations, especially about protecting children. And that is an issue that many parents were made aware of, many in Gwinnett, and obviously across the state. And I believe that has caused parents to be concerned, grandparents, and even teachers who work in that system don't want to be in an environment in which they are pitted against each other as peer educators that happen to be of different races. Educators, in my mind, are some of the most special people. They do the job every day and they don't get paid enough. And I'm thankful that we've made moves, and Republicans in this state have funded and fully funded QBE. The only time we didn't was during the middle of a pandemic. The current budget is going to fully fund QBE. Do we need to find ways to do more? I'm open to that. Listen, there are a lot of folks that come down here that they want to, make a point. I'm here to make a difference. And I would believe that that issue that was raised by that one school board member is an example of divisive concepts. And it would allow, if this bill were to become law, it would allow a teacher to express that concern. And probably in that situation, it would end up potentially at the state board to come in and review and say, has that board member conducted themselves outside the bounds of their role? And have they done something to cause a divisive concept to be a part of the curriculum? Their free speech rights are still protected. So the review may be, you know what? This one board member went off the rails. I'm a former school board member of 15 years. Guess what? Sometimes school board members go off the rails. They say things they shouldn't say. Sometimes legislators say things they shouldn't say. But we need to make sure that parents have a process, and that's what this bill does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, thank you for the complaint review process. That will address a lot of issues as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Rich. Chair recognizes Representative Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Wade. Thank you. Same thing that Chairman Rich just said for your vetting of this bill and looking over the bill and your actions to try to protect our students. What I would ask of you, to solidify what you did, how you involved Department of Education in as you were vetting this bill and trying to decide what was the best course to take.
Sure. So my thought process is again, I'm going to refer to my dad and my mom. They taught me, I think it's because they wanted me to pay attention. And my brother, we were very good at ignoring my parents, but they taught me this philosophy that wisdom listens. So we're going to listen to the people it's going to impact. So Department of Education, we talked about this with a draft concept and said, how do we need to approach this? And, Matt Cardoza and some of his staff can share the number of communications and calls and discussions and iterations. I'm sure Legislative Council member Michael Walker would be happy to share with you the countless discussions that we had. But in every case, we had a conversation about how is this going to impact teachers? How is it going to impact schools? Are we overreaching? Are we underreaching? But are we addressing the concerns like that you addressed earlier? But also, I literally looked at this, tried to look at this through the eyes of my second grader and kindergartner. And what do we want to do for the classroom? What do we want to prevent? Right? We see the divisions, the loud voices, I think they are using laziness for their arguments. We don't want that to be in our classroom. We don't want children to be in a position to be treated disparately because of the color of their skin. And so that's how I included them. I also worked with folks at GAE. I worked with folks at Gale. I did not directly work with GSSA because GSBA and I did have conversations, and they all shared concerns, and they may still not be supportive because they represent their members, and I understand that. But ultimately, this is about ensuring that children are at the center of this and parents have a good, reasonable process. And hopefully, most cases, local communities will be able to have these conversations in a cooled manner so that people can really talk about these issues. And the earlier that we address these issues, I believe we will be able to have that ultimate goal where we can all be friends and future friends.
One follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
If you could, I'd like to limit it to 60 seconds, please.
Standards are still in place for the DOE to develop curriculum to pass on to the individual local schools, correct?
Correct. We are not touching anything in the Georgia standards at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Irwin. Representative Carter, I can recognize you for 1 minute, please.
Oh, I don't need a minute. Can you address the, how this bill is going to affect waivers and funding?
Sure. So ultimately, as a last resort, if a parent has an issue that cannot be resolved locally and they appeal it to their local board of education, and the local board, they have a finding and they don't agree with the parent, but the parent truly believes what happened, and they have evidence that they want to be reviewed by the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education will be asked to do a review. They already have certain processes that they can do that for countless laws within Title 20. And ultimately, if the state school board is provided evidence and they agree with the parent's findings, right, or the parent's concern, then they can ask the school system through a directive, like they currently can do a corrective action plan, to address this, because the state board says, you guys didn't catch this, we did, you need to make a change. If that local school board makes the decision to ignore and reject the State Board of Education's request for corrective action, then they would have specific and tailored, and the department will work to design this. I'm allowing the department to have some say in how are they going to address a strategic waiver or a charter system waiver, and that would be specific to the issue. One of the ways I look at this is maybe there's a character ed program that a local community member, I'm a Rotarian, and sometimes Rotarians get excited about serving other people, and they'll offer to buy an entire elementary school a character education program, but they may not be educators. They may not realize that it has a divisive concept within that curriculum. And maybe because it's been paid for, they don't want to, the local school doesn't want to offend, right, the folks that donated this program. State board comes in, reviews it, and if for some reason that the local school system says, no, we want to keep this character ed program, even though you say it has a divisive concept, we reject the state board's opinion, we're going to keep doing this because the Rotary Club bought it. In that case, a strategic waiver, the intent of the legislation would allow the State Board of Education to say, you know what, you're ignoring us, we're going to remove your waivers as it relates to that specific school and maybe a character education program, meaning you have to remove it. We will allow you to present other options, but you're going to have our approval to do so. I'm leaving the opportunity for school systems, school boards, and the State Board of Education in a worst case scenario to work these issues out. But there needs to be an emphasis that it's important because we don't want children to be in this position. So you may lose your waivers, but it would be in a very extreme situation, and I believe it would be extremely rare.
And the funding?
There is no direct in my bill. I'm not going after QB funding. I'm not going to try to punish in that manner. I don't think that's appropriate.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Representative Wade, we sure do appreciate you taking the time to do
Thanks.
that. We're going to go ahead and move to public comment now. If you don't mind, if you could remain there,
Okay.
just in case the chair needs to refer to you for any
Sure.
type of information. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go primarily in person, and I want to sprinkle in some online. I always feel bad for the folks online. They just got to sit there and they don't get to say anything. So we're going to go ahead and bring them in and integrate them a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and start in person. Unfortunately, we're going to go 90 seconds. So right now, we're thinking about the most pithy way that you can get your comment out without doing a word slip like I just did. So that's what happens when you don't drink water for 3 hours. So let's go ahead and start. Up is Cole Musio, and on deck is Mike Griffin. Mr. Musio. Remember, my right hand means you got 10 seconds left.
All right, I'll try to be pithy and not the other thing. All right, so I want to thank Representative Wade for bringing this bill. I'm Cole Musio, president of Frontline Policy Action. We support this bill, and I'm going to try to be as quick as I can for primary reasons. First of all, we are a Christian organization. We're not going to be ashamed of that. We believe, first and foremost, that we're all made in the image of God. And that affects how you treat, how you view, how you look at other people, how you talk about other people. And I believe that this bill is an important step towards getting us back to that as a civil society. Number two, I appreciate the work that Representative Wade and others have done in putting this together. It's a timeless piece of legislation. It's the kind of thing that's not here to address one little crisis and makes it worse later on down the road. This is the kind of bill and this kind of language, these divisive concepts are the kinds of things that you put in place, you ban now. It makes our society, would have made our society better in the past, will make it better in the future. And so we appreciate the timeless nature of this bill. Number three, it does allow for the real teaching of history. There are many areas of our past that are worth mourning over. And we should mourn over them. We should know about them. We should learn from them, and we should mourn over them as a people. But no child in America today should be made to feel guilty for things that they did not commit. And that is a very serious differential. Number four, this does address a real problem. It addresses a real problem, whether we've had it, whether we're listening to school board chairman in Gwinnett or other places across the state. This is the kind of thing we're hearing from parents and from educators and people involved in our system all around the state and all around the country. And this addresses a real problem. So I appreciate this bill. We fully support it and appreciate this committee's favorable consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musio. Mr. Griffin and Mr. Nightstorm, you are on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, and we represent approximately 1.3 million Georgians and around 3,500 churches. And I want to say we do support HB 1084. We appreciate Representative Will Wade and his willingness to give some leadership on this issue. Georgia Baptist in 2020 passed a Georgia Baptist Convention resolution opposing the teaching of critical race theory and intersectionality. And in that, we talked about the fact that we were concerned that because of this kind of teaching, it ends up making things many times actually worse instead of making things better. And we're concerned because we want to make sure that the cure is not worse than the disease. We want to make sure things go in the right direction. We also passed that same year a resolution against racism and what's been going on in our country. And we talk about the sin of racism, and we talk about the importance of sympathizing with our brothers and sisters who are experiencing injustice, and we weep with them and we stand with them. And so we want to work making sure that what we're doing is truly toward reconciliation and treating one another equally. And so I close with a statement from Martin Luther King, I think, which kind of sums it up. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Right on time. That's impressive. And I can now say pithy. Mr. Wade.
Apologies. I wanted to my friend, I wanted to let you know something and alleviate your concern. The friends that we have over in the Department of Education have informed me that yes, in Georgia standards in 8th grade, we do discuss and teach about the 1906 race riots. So in Atlanta. So just thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wade. I appreciate that. The chair would like to recognize Representative Lauren McDonald for being so kind as to get the drinks. Thank you, sir. We sure do appreciate it. Mr. Nightstorm, you're up. 90 seconds. Mr. Wilson, James Wilson, you're on deck.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is YG Nightstorm. I am running for U.S. Congress in District 7. But let's forget about the politics for a minute. I am a father. I'm a proud father of 7 adult children, but 3 of my children are dead. Now, I run in security. I've been doing security for over 25 years, and we're seeing an escalation in schools due to race. Now, I'm in support of anything about de-escalation, because in one of the classes that I was teaching, and this is real talk to everybody, I don't care what side of the issue you on, we had a Black kid have a gun and wanted to blow the brains out of a white kid because he felt that he was an oppressor. That same white kid hated all Black kids because Black men raped his mother when he was 5. Now, this issue of us in Generation X carrying this brokenness of bigotry and hatred and pumping this crap into our children needs to stop. Now, unfortunately, the Black kid's aunt is a teacher who teaches that all white people are oppressors and irredeemable by God. Not even Jesus Christ can save them. And the mother of the white kid believes that every Black man is a racist. This is a problem on both sides. There are plenty of racist white people. There are plenty of racist Black people. But if we want this to stop, we need to make it stop. I appreciate the bill, but no school board, no teacher is going to be able to stop this issue unless we stop this issue. And the fact that I've seen my own child dead in a casket, when your child is dead over this stupidness, then it's too late to cry, because we need to do something about it right now. God bless everybody on this issue, for real. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. We absolutely appreciate it. Mr. Wilson, you're up, and Mr. Alex Ames, you're on deck.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee. I have to say that I'm James Wilson. I am a college student at Georgia State University. I'm a product of the public schools in Georgia, and I'm proud of my education. It was good, and it's prepared me for where I am today. And so that's why I'm happy to see a lot of energy is being given to schools in this session. I'm seeing a lot of bills pertaining to schools. But unfortunately, in my view, the energy is being directed in the wrong direction. It's going towards legislation against trans kids. It's going towards censorship in classrooms. It's going towards things that really, they're not issues. They're just not issues. Now, I'll admit, schools have not always taught race as well as they could, but that's because a lot of the teachers in Georgia, they were taught a whitewashed version of history. When you look at their textbooks, they are whitewashed, and that's sad. So they have a bad understanding of racism in our state and in our country. And then on top of that, they're not giving a lot of training to speak on these subjects. So when they've been taught whitewashed history, and then they're not given a lot of training to speak on these subjects, how can we pounce on them and say that they're trying to teach people that they're oppressors and things of that nature? If we really want to solve this issue, we need to make sure that teachers are better equipped to teach on things like race. Because a lot of the examples that we're seeing in the news, the teachers will then say, oh, well, I was trying to teach about it, but I made a mistake. We should give these teachers more training so they can speak on these issues with clarity and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. My apologies, Ms. Ames.
It's fine. Good afternoon, senators. My name is Alex. My parents are public school teachers. I'm a graduate of public schools. My siblings go there as well. When I left campus for hours on Monday to testify against a bill very similar to this one, I've heard the author and this author say that the bill is meant to get in front of a major emergency proactively. But I'll tell you what actual kids in Georgia schools are experiencing. My friend Lily never had a teacher who looked like her until grade 10. My friend Arwen had teachers tell him that immigrants like his family didn't belong in our country. My friend Aduni had one counselor for 700 kids. And these are the actual emergencies facing all kids in Georgia schools, especially Black, immigrant, and impoverished students, not myths manufactured to excuse politicians meddling in the classroom. My white professor, a former legislator, showed us a video of a Klansman and other white supremacists holding a rally in Forsyth County, 1987. Did I feel bad as a white person learning this? I feel bad, not because my skin looks like this, but because bad things happen to human beings. I was also proud of my professor for standing up against the Klan and counter protest. Is it wrong for our children to learn what is right, to know that genocide and enslavement were in fact horrific? How can we emphasize how far we have come as a country without acknowledging the truthful history of our state? Under this bill, that lesson would be banned because it discusses systemic racism reinforced by our government, and because the people who marched for white supremacy aren't history, they're alive today. Censorship steals funds and opportunities from kids just trying to find their own opinions in the world. For our sake, do not pass this bill. There are many other things you can do to support children. This is not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ames. The next speaker is Coco, and I'm sorry, PA, and then it looks like my signature, just a line.
It's Pappy. Good afternoon. My name is Coco Pappy. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Communications at Deep Center. We work with young people within the school district and juvenile court. And I'm here on behalf of them today to say we fully are in opposition to this bill. There are far too many unanswered questions for this bill to be moving as is. Questions like, do we have data or research on how many districts this would affect? If this is a problem we are trying to get in front of, then which Georgia schools have given reason to believe they might currently are or might be in violation of this bill? Nearly 2/3 of Georgia students in K through 12 public schools are students of color, as are their parents. Has there been any consultation with any of those constituents to gauge the potential negative impacts on them? If enacted, how would this timeline affect smaller districts with less personnel or resources? How would this affect districts that are already experiencing staffing shortages? Do we think it's appropriate to punish districts who may be dealing with staffing challenges with reduced flexibility and autonomy? And last, is there a fiscal note for the impact on staffing requirements to accommodate these new complaint processes and curriculum oversight? I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Steph Alley is up and Isabel Arturo is on deck.
All right. Thank you, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ali. I am the Policy Director at New Georgia Project Action Fund, and we oppose the.
That's on me.
That's okay. I'll take Miss Coco's time. It's all good.
Poor execution.
Okay, so we do oppose this bill. The point of studying history is not to instill students with a sense of blame or of guilt, but to develop their critical thinking skills so that they can recognize how our past has shaped our world today. It's not in a vacuum. No matter what authors of these bills intend for them to do, their obvious outcome is going to be to further whitewash what is taught to our Georgia children and to erase and minimize the painful and violent oppression that Black Georgians and Indigenous peoples have experienced at the hands of their white neighbors. I say this as a mother of a student. He's too young for public school now, but he will be going to public school. He is biracial himself. And the idea that he could feel guilty for one part of his identity oppressing another is insulting to me, that he would not be able to learn the context of what happened. You, sir, quoted MLK, but how do we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. without talking about his quotes, including the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. You also, sir, quoted Gandhi, who happens to be Gujarati, which is what my son is as well. How do we talk about his work without mentioning it was the white British Raj that he was fighting against? How do we talk about it without mentioning the genocide of his people, which Winston Churchill presided over, calling them a beastly people? The reasons behind it are important to the context. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Ali. I appreciate it. Isabel Arturo is up, and then we're going to switch to Zoom. Marla Curtin.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Isabel Otero. I am the Georgia Policy Director for the SPLC Action Fund. I am a product of, Ringgold High School and Ringgold Middle School. I went to the University of Georgia. My mom's been a teacher in Whitfield County. I care about this bill. I've got nieces and nephews that are about to go to school. I understand that this has been a tough couple of years, but this is a kind of solution in search of a problem. Right? We have 20 plus bills in this being heard right now that are all out attacks on public school education. We are trying to cause confusion. We're going to inevitably censor teachers. And these are adult problems, right? These are cringeworthy hearings that I have had to sit through, where we can't quite get to what exactly does objective mean, who can and can't say anything. We just need to let teachers do their job. And just so that you all know, there's already a process in the code to deal with these kind of things. And Title 20, Chapter 2, Article 1, Section 20-2-13. That's what local school boards and local schools use to deal with local controversies, to deal with issues. This is a local issue. This is playing out in school boards all across the country. Let it continue to play out as a local issue. Let parents and teachers work together. And let's not confuse the issue. Let's not have a blanket solution that is just adults having an argument. Please, thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect. I want to go ahead and switch to Zoom now, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Marla Curtin.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Marla Curitan. I am a longtime resident of Roswell, Georgia, and the parent of a Fulton County student. I am the child of a career educator and administrator. I'm speaking today because I'm deeply concerned about the future of public education and our country. HB 1084 is a bill that is designed to censor, limit, and intimidate educators, administrators, parents, and students. When we strip away the legalese and the contradictory language used in the draft being reviewed today, we are left with a few facts about the beliefs and attitudes of the bill's sponsors. The bill sponsors believe that our very qualified educators cannot be trusted to teach their objective and truthful curricula. Instead, they wish to micromanage what happens in Georgia classrooms. The bill sponsors believe that our skilled curriculum developers and our educational content partners need to be censored by politicians who fear teaching our students about truthful history. What this means is that the bill sponsors must want our children to be fearful of the educational process, untrusting of our dedicated teachers and administrators, ignorant of important but uncomfortable American and world history. I implore you to take your own words to heart. Help our children to thrive, trust our teachers and administrators, keep politics out of our classrooms, stop trying to censor our curricula. Let us teach the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Curtin. I appreciate your time. Next up is Andrea Young, and on deck, I believe it's Jordan Madden.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. I want to share another quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children. I'm Andrea Young, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Georgia and also a product of Georgia's public schools. My mother was also a public school teacher in Atlanta. I want to say that we should teach about race and racism the same way we teach about math and chemistry as accurately as we can. Whether you're a white, Black, or brown, as a parent, you want your children to get an accurate view of history, including the way we have not lived up to our ideals on race and inequality, including now. Governor Jimmy Carter's inaugural address in 1971 said, "I say to you, quite frankly, that the time for racial discrimination is over. No poor, rural, weak, or Black person should ever have to bear the additional burden of being deprived of the opportunity of an education, a job, or simple justice. Under this legislation, a teacher would risk sanction if he or she assigned that speech to seriously discuss in class. This is potentially unconstitutionally vague, violating the due process clause of the 14th Amendment because it's too vague for any educator to fully understand whether or not they will be punished for teaching or saying something about race or racism that can be considered by someone to be a divisive concept. In my lifetime, Georgia has progressed from a state that divided white and Black citizens through strict racial segregation to a state that could host the Centennial Olympic Games and welcome people of all races, creeds, and colors. This legislation would deny Georgia's children the fullness of that story. I want my granddaughter and all Georgia's school children to love their country and to love the truth. You can't love one without the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jordan Madden, and on deck is Joshua Anthony.
Good afternoon. I am Jordan Madden, 17-year-old student at Georgia State University. Growing up, I learned a very old saying that still rings true to this day. Those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. H. Bill 1084 is a bill that fixes a solution that does not exist. For starters, this bill removes important history that brings light to what is going on today. History like the dark lights of America's founding. History like Georgia's strong support to remove the Cherokee Nation from their sacred land, and so much more history that I can go on and on about. This place, where the Civil War ranged from the mountains of the Appalachian to the coast of Savannah and the hard Piedmont rocks between, where the birth of the civil rights movement was born, where historical oppression now in this day and age lives. This place, this great state, is rooted in some very dark history that is important for us to learn. I do not support H. Bill 1084 because it allows people like me to continue to be left behind, bared from the history that is within my culture and teaching our history, our great and dark America, our great and dark Georgia, a history that defines who we are. This bill will continue to dismiss a history that needs to be said. I want to emphasize a true biblical saying really quickly. Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good. It doesn't say all things are good or all things will be good. It says all things work together for good. The important history, all of that history, as the sponsor, Representative Wade, has stated, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I truly believe this bill is important. This bill is very crucial. In moving forward, we must find a solution that includes all history, especially the ones who show this state, this country in a positive light and negative light, because that shows us who we are. Georgia will not always be good, but Georgia will always have history that works together for good. That includes the bad history. To close, Georgia will always have scars. I truly believe that if we want to learn and grow to be better Georgians, better Americans, we must show those scars and allow them to heal and learn from that history, so we may not doom ourselves to repeat it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. Future speakers, let's do everything we can to hold to the 90 seconds. I sure would appreciate it. Joshua Anthony is next, and on deck is Margaret, and I want to say Ciccarelli.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joshua Anthony. I'm a student at Georgia State, and I've done every type of possible schooling you can imagine: private school, online school, public school. And my family is full of educators, the vast majority, as a matter of fact. This bill puts a thorn in all that they have tried and worked for. We are dividing our students for issues that don't exist. We're hiding their history. We preach about we want to protect the First Amendment rights and critical thinking, but hiding their history is in its sense, is discarding what history truly is. The purpose of history is to learn from it and what to do in the future to prevent it. And we speak about Martin Luther King. You love that quote of yours. I see that and I respect that. But are we going to let our students know that the man that killed them had racist sympathies? He believed in a system where white people did, in fact, people did in fact believe that white people were the leaders of the world. It's not fair to their students. It's not fair to the people. It's not fair to the teachers who are hemmed up with this specific issue. So what we're doing here is allowing the possibility of an issue that doesn't exist to flare up into an issue that does now exist. We're creating a problem that doesn't exist. And I see the 10 seconds waving. I appreciate you. The biggest thing is that I'm in opposition of this simply because we are putting our children in danger. We're putting our teachers in danger. And this is just the biggest slap in the face to history and everything that Black people and people who have supported us in going forward into progressing into a stronger nation have fought for. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. That's very eloquent. Please come see me when it's time for you to graduate. Might want to hire you. All right.
You might have some competition.
That's
Mr.
true.
Chair. I think we probably
very
all want to
eloquent.
hire him after that.
So on deck, though, is Michael Bernstein, who is online. I apologize, Miss Ciccarelli.
Ciccarelli. Thank you, Mr.
okay.
Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Ciccarelli from the Professional Association of Georgia Educators, Georgia's largest organization representing around 93,000 educators serving in a variety of roles across the state. Most are classroom teachers, but we've got everybody from bus drivers, school cafeteria workers to superintendents and school administrators. We appreciate the opportunity to share feedback on 1084, and I want to very carefully premise our comments by underscoring that we share the author's desire, and I think your desire for transparency in school practices and commitment to ensuring that parents are both aware of what's happening in their children's schools and have meaningful opportunity for feedback. Further, we also want to note and underscore that Representative Wade has been very welcoming to the education community to incorporate feedback. And we also appreciate the comments that he made today about welcoming additional changes or constructive criticism regarding this bill. To that end, Paige has two suggested areas for refinement. First, it's the complaint mechanism itself. Is it feasible for schools and local districts to administer? Does it mandate creation of a practice that is a real value add for parents so that we make sure that we are delivering on what we're discussing here today? In order to answer those questions, we need a better idea of current practices in classrooms. Are districts following what's already required under Georgia law? We believe that it would be helpful to form a stakeholder group to study that. The second major area is to give teachers a better idea of what the guardrails are for what they can and cannot teach so that they can serve students confidently and sensitively. We appreciate the opportunity and look forward to working with Representative Wade and the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are going to go now online, Mr. Bernstein. And on deck is Michaela A. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Michael Bernstein. I'm a rabbi in Alpharetta. I wanted to first say that Representative Wade, I was moved by your story about seeing Auschwitz and having it really penetrate to your heart. I would say that it's probably not because you felt guilty, but because you felt responsible when you saw it. It's hard to imagine that you felt that way without understanding the particular role hatred of Jews played in the Holocaust. And that's the point. I think that someone who teaches the Holocaust without that experience would do those kind of lessons that you mentioned before, where they just make their class go through, you be the Nazis, you be the Jews, or you be the slave holders and you be the enslaved. You have to understand and let that history penetrate you, not to. I think the best way to accomplish what you have talked about by being one human race is that we have to teach honestly about the poison of racism. There's no way to go past it without going through it. And I would just add one last point that you have quoted Dr. King many times, others have. Dr. King is a brilliant prophet for us. A book called Dear Martin about a 17-year-old in Atlanta who needs to find their inspiration by writing these imaginary letters to Dr. King. That book was banned under a very similar kind of approach, that it was too divisive, that it felt too hard for certain students to hear because it was about violence in a certain powerful way. I would say that it's that book that needs to be read so that we do understand not just the facts of history, but that it penetrates to the hearts of those who read it and those who teach it in the way that your visit to Auschwitz penetrated into yours. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our own heartfelt responses to what you are trying to do from your heart.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. That's appreciated. I'd like to recognize Michaela. I'm going to say A.
That's
fine. Okay, and then on deck is Justin Pauly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for this time to speak today. My name is Michaela Arciaga. I am a Georgia Education Policy Fellow for the Intercultural Development Research Association. We are an independent, nonpartisan education nonprofit that is committed to achieving equal education opportunity for our students through strong public schools. I'm also a former high school math teacher. I spent the last 3 years teaching high schoolers Algebra 1 and 2 just over a mile down the street. I am here because we strongly oppose this bill and the implications it has for our students. We know that our students thrive when they see themselves reflected in their learning environments, and I know this from experience. I'm concerned that this bill starts by defining and prohibiting a series of concepts that would be common in any class discussion about race or identity. It defines them as divisive, and I feel that this signals to our students that we do not value the lived experiences that they bring into our classrooms every day. I recognize the sponsors' commitment to giving teachers space to discuss these issues in a way that is educationally appropriate. I'm concerned that that doesn't give enough specificity to teachers of what that actually means and how we should represent these issues to our students in a way that honors and affirms their identities. It requires extensive and continuous training for teachers to facilitate these experiences. I'm concerned by the provision of this bill that would remove those training requirements. We know that the best way to prevent teacher bias and discrimination is through diversity and identity training for teachers to equip them with the language and tools to recognize, affirm, and support their students' unique contexts that they bring into our classrooms every day. We encourage you to show your support for students and teachers by deciding not to advance this bill or bills like it, and choosing instead to consider legislation that supports all students' identities and promotes safe, respectful school climates. And we're happy to help you develop that legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Arciaga. Up is Justin Pauley. On deck is Representative Brad Thomas.
Chairman, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak on House Bill 1084. I'm Justin Pauley with the Georgia School Boards Association. House Bill 1084 seems to be trying to strike a balance between prohibiting concepts considered divisive and eliminating critical thinking and curricula that intersect with these concepts. That is a difficult task. We already have numerous laws, rules, and regulations at the state and federal level dealing with discrimination, academic standards, and requirements for professional personnel. Legislation cannot change individual beliefs or values, but it can stifle discussion of current events and our complex history, whether it intends to or not. We appreciate the inclusion of the things this bill is not to be construed to prohibit, but we do not believe it will temper the accusations occurring. No matter how well a teacher or other official responds, there are likely to be complaints that one or more of the divisive concepts were taught, acted upon, promoted, or encouraged. Then we are in a he, she said situation when no amount of appealing will settle it. That being said, Representative Wade has worked with the Georgia School Boards Association. He's been open to our feedback, and we have provided that. And we would just want to note that we're appreciative of that opportunity. Look forward to continuing that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pauley. Representative Thomas is up, and on deck is Representative McLeod on Zoom.
Thank you very much. I come here today to speak out in support of HB 1084. I actually want to start at the end of my speech. I will not allow the dreams and ambitions of a child to be destroyed by divisive concepts. I will not allow a child, regardless of their skin color, to believe the system is rigged against them because of the way they look. I will not allow that to happen. And that's why I'm speaking out in support of HB 1084 today. I'm in full support of any bill that eliminates divisive concepts in our society. As many of you know me as a member, fellow representative. What you don't know is I'm a father and my child is in the public school system. As also many of you may not know, I have provided input and assistance in this bill. A bill that singularly has one goal. It's to eliminate divisive concepts from being taught in our schools. I was one of the first lawmakers to introduce an alternate bill that I've received which you actually named the bill earlier today, that I had an outpour of concerned parents. That's cause for action. And I mean, beyond that, the simple fact that we have testimony today regarding the Gwinnett County School Board Chair and divisive comments that she has made. Call for action. You cannot say there's not a call for action. There is a call for action. We've demonstrated it. So the only thing I'm going to say, because I know we're running low on time, the biggest opposition we've heard to this bill is that it seeks to keep the true and accurate teaching of history out of schools. That is fundamentally false. It's simply a tactic perpetrated by detractors of the bill as a way to set up a straw man argument. And that argument is to keep from debating the true purpose of that bill. And that's to not teach divisive concepts in our schools. And out of respect for time, Mr. Chairman, although I have much more to say, I will yield.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. See what happens when you give a politician the microphone. All right, moving on. Representative McLeod on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and all the members of the Subcommittee on Education. I wanted to start with just making sure that people understand race is a construct, right? It was used to divide people in the beginning, and this country used it beautifully in making sure that the white race was superior to the black race because you enslaved. So I just want to make that as a point. I had a student in Gwinnett County who graduated, who was taught that Nelson Mandela died in jail. So we're not even teaching factual history. We're not even fully funding public education. We are using a 1987 formula. And we're not even close to what we're supposed to be accomplishing. This idea of CRT is not even taught in public school. It is a made-up concept that is being done here. And I think we need to stop this. This is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's important for everyone that's in the audience, as well as on the committee right now, to understand that if we don't teach factual history, we're doomed to repeat it. And this country has a lot of marks on it and that are not good. And nobody's trying to make anybody feel guilty, but we cannot coddle people. Our children have been taught this history from your point of view as white people. It has not been built on how we have seen this world. It has been built on how you've seen this world. And I wanted to ask everyone, you see Black folks with names like Smith, McLeod, Langley, those names are all Anglo-Saxon names, right? They're names that were given to each of the human beings that were on plantation, and they were branded with the last name of their owner. And you know what? Most people don't even see that in a day-to-day life. They see it as normal that a Black person's name is Smith or Walters or McLeod. And that is an actual direct product of slavery. And so I ask that this bill be rejected because it is not teaching facts. And as far as Therese Johnson, she has one voice on the school board, and that is her own voice. And I think it's important for us to ensure that we are following the curriculum that is offered by the superintendent of schools in the state of Georgia. And that is what all the teachers have been doing. And we're still not where we need to be doing. We're not even teaching civics properly in school. So
Representative McLeod, if you could take 10 seconds and close up, I sure would appreciate it.
Sure. I urge everyone to really look at how we're really teaching our children history and civic engagement. And that is my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McLeod. My apologies. I believe the last name is Harsh Kinay.
That would be me.
Okay, thank you so much. And then on deck is Katie Howard.
Hello, thank you. My name is Cecily Harsh-Kanane. I'm with Public Education Matters Georgia Action Fund. The most disturbing aspects of 1084 are the prohibitive elements and the potential quelling effect that forbidding the teaching of so-called divisive concepts will have on the classrooms and the academic and emotional development of our students. Teachers every day with professional expertise carefully and thoughtfully facilitate our students' ability to learn and understand topics that impact their lives and help them make sense of the world around them, and in turn, develop them into the well-functioning and contributing members of our society. This is considered best practice in classrooms. To limit or stifle this understanding for children is to handicap them for their futures. But the additionally problematic piece of this bill is the punitive aspects that could have a devastating impact on the functioning of our school systems and individual schools. School systems in Georgia are by law required to seek a flexibility contract or declare themselves status quo. All but a handful of systems have considered to be charter or waiver systems, which in turn allows and requires requesting of some waivers from Title II provisions and DOE, SBO rules and regulations. The approval of these waivers, this flexibility is based upon the system's multi-year strategic plan for improvement of student performance. Each year, with this flexibility contract in place, the system and its individual schools do extensive planning to ensure that schools are well-functioning and ready to deliver on these goals. Decisions about hiring, scheduling, class sizes, class assignments, filling up subjects, and so on are determined upon this set budget. To take away waivers, and I know Representative Wade said they'd be taken away carefully and with thought. We can't guarantee that. They'd be taken away at the state level, regardless of the needs of a local community, a local school at any arbitrary point within an already running school year, and for a minimum of 12 months could be hugely disruptive and throw our system and schools into disarray. Our schools need our support. They need your support at all times, and particularly now with all the mental challenges they are facing. HB 1084 has the opposite effect and diverts your much needed attention from the good that needs doing for the 1.7 million students of Georgia. Representative Wade, you talked about the myriad of issues facing our children. You said, let's center them. Let's truly center our children. Please vote no on HB 1084. Thank you.
Katie Howard's up, and I want to say Noel Kayan. I apologize if I didn't get your last name correct.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I am Katie Howard, and I'm a first-term member of the Atlanta Board of Education. I am also a proud graduate of the former Grady High School, then a majority Black school with a strong Black culture, and I went on to Furman University. So I am the product of diverse educational experiences, and I'm a better citizen for it. I am now a mother of 2 students at Martin Luther King Junior Middle School, which is right down the way. And I'm honored to serve on our school board representing a district that reflects the diversity of our beautiful city. HB 1084 is a bad bill that conflicts with the values of public education. The ABOE is committed to intellectual freedom, to the right of every child to learn in an environment free from fear and intimidation, to respecting the professionalism of educators, to the inherent worth of every human being, without respect to race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin, and to non-politicized instruction in every subject and every classroom. The legislation you're considering today would hamper the ability of educators to serve students and contribute to their intellectual growth. HB 1084 stifles meaningful instruction and pits educators against parents in our state government. HB 1084 is wrong for Georgia and wrong for Georgia's public schools. This bill was introduced to appeal to our cynical instincts and fears instead of challenging us to address the true complexities of our nation's collective story. The proposed legislation lays a path for a slippery slope of intrusion into classroom, which counters Georgia's longstanding practice of respecting local control in education. HB 1084 is wrong for the children of Georgia. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, and congratulations on your election, and thank you for service to the people. And then last but not least, the anchor, Kevin Joaquin.
Thank you so much. My name is Noelle Kahan, and I do appreciate this bill. I believe it complements OCGA 20-2-10-11, which says loosely, instructional material shall not contain anything of partisan or sectarian nature. As a volunteer teacher, you need to know what diverse teachers across Georgia are dealing with. My question to the author is, will this bill protect us, we the teachers, from these type of examples? A book club was offered, 2 book clubs were offered to Georgia teachers from the Georgia Department of Education, one of them by Dr. Bettina Love, which said, quote, "White people are wearing white vision glasses. Teachers spirit murder children every day through these glasses because of their vision is impaired by racism, hate, and white supremacy." end quote. Also, there are trainings given to teachers, and I have copies of all these for you. White teachers are told that they have privilege, and this one teacher's quote who took the training said that she was confronted with the painful awareness of the privilege that she carries as a white woman. That training was $5,000. We also have classroom and home resources. One of them is Brain Prop. This one lecture, it lectures kids, white kids, for almost 10 minutes about the guilt that they bear for being part of a structural racism and built-in system of bias that makes life easier for white people and harder for Black people. The National Education Association says that they are going to fight back against any anti-CRT rhetoric, and this is proof. Just recently, the Lovett School says that they have created, news broke today that the Lovett School DEI office has compiled a list of parents that are insubordinate to this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kevin Joaquin, is that correct?
Joaquin.
I apologize.
You're good. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really good to be here. I'm here to talk against HB 1084 and ask that it not be voted forward. The idea that students feel guilty and distress learning about race and racism, not being able to learn about those kinds of concepts really prevents and puts a dent in how students learn local history. I'm from South Georgia, from a place called Tifton, and I also went to Turner County schools. And I just gotta say that none of us learned about Mary Turner, a 19-year-old Black woman who was lynched while she was still pregnant among 11 other Black people across the South in a wave of white supremacist terrorism. We didn't learn about the struggles that Black people had to face in Cairo, Georgia, for example, facing armed white supremacists that try to prevent them from voting and exercising the right to vote. We didn't learn about the 18 different treaties that were signed with the Muskogee Nation to coerce and take away their lands. And this is fundamental history to talk about how the state of Georgia even acquired 37 million acres of land, right? We didn't learn about the social movement struggle that was happening in Albany, Georgia, and its role in the civil rights movement. We didn't learn about the things that they were fighting against, like voter suppression and segregated schools. And so I'm just here to stand and say that HB 1084 it really prevents us from approaching history in an honest way and prevents students from also learning local history, from learning local history that is very fundamental to how we associate with other, how we associate in the community today. So thank you.
Thank you. I sure do appreciate you taking the time. That finishes up our public comment. We are definitely running up against a couple of time limits. Representative Wade, if it's okay, I'd like to give you 3 minutes to make any final comments, either maybe address some of the things that were made during public comment, or maybe some final comments before the committee starts to consider.
Certainly. Thank you very much. To all the folks that spoke to this bill in favor or against, I appreciate your comments. I really do. I mean that. I want to make sure that the folks that have the fear that this is somehow going to stifle an educator's ability to discuss divisive concepts or to discuss issues that are facing our country today or have faced in the past, this bill does not limit an educator. What this does is it empowers parents to ensure that kids and children in our schools of all races are not pitted against each other. I know that there is a tendency for folks to try to take their fear, and there are people that have fears that this bill doesn't do enough to alleviate those concerns. I believe that these issues can be resolved through the process that is laid out with the conflict resolution piece. I also believe that teachers do want some direction, because it is hard to teach, to ensure that they are not inadvertently causing children to believe that somehow that they are a problem for their peer, to their friend next to them. This is solving an issue, and I'm open to improving it. But I would also say that the things that folks spoke out to say that it would stifle education, there is specific language through the feedback that I received from many people that referenced our conversations to ensure that we are not attacking teachers. And I also want to remind you, I gave the point about there occasionally in this last 12 months, from December of 20 to December of 2021, we had 83 educators who lost their teaching license. They lost it because they did something that caused a group of people to go through a review process to determine they didn't need to be in the classroom. 83 out of 150,000. It is not a major problem, but there are problems. Folks, kids come to school wanting to love their neighbor, to love their friends, and to learn. This bill will ensure that students are going to be protected first. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wade. I appreciate that. The chair will recognize Chairman Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the appropriate time, I would like to be recognized for a motion.
This is the appropriate time.
I move to pass.
And is there a second? Is there any conversation? Representative Carter.
Oh, I had a motion, but you acknowledged her first, so I'll wait to vote.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of HB 1084 passing, please say aye. All those opposed? Nay. Nay. The motion carries. This motion moves on to the full committee. Thank you very much for your time. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.